Alright, so we've got that. Now this is going to be the payload. We have to get this thing into at least orbit, and honestly we need another stage on this that'll probably... The next stage is probably going to be the thing that makes us leave Kerbin's orbit and sends it towards the moon. That's going to be its job. And we can probably embiggen things for that. Now I think if I went and just grabbed, say, the TR-18 stack decoupler, that'll attach there perfectly fine. And I think it just ends up being a nice shape for our fairing over here. Oh, it's not quite. There we go. There we are. To grab our payload. I think that'll work. Looks nice. Whoops. Stay there. Shift click. Okay, so underneath this, we're going to need the stage that's going to be responsible for pushing this to the moon. And I think just like probably a T400 with a Terrier, which is another engine that's very fuel efficient in space, underneath that. So this stage would have, wow, 2500 delta V is massive. Massive. We're gonna be overkilling it on fuel, and hey, there's no such thing as too much overkill. So this is easily going to be able to get us to the moon. Honestly, again, we're going to be dumping stuff early and wasting fuel, but it gives us a margin of error, so that's okay. Then we need the stage that will actually get us to space from the ground. And that we don't want to use a Terrier engine for. While they're very fuel efficient in space, they suck in an atmosphere. So for that, we're going to want to use probably just the swivel engine, which will have more than enough thrust for us and gives us some steering potential. So this first stage is going to be 2,500 meters per second. More than enough to get us to reach space, not enough for us to actually get into an orbit, but it'll get us to high atmosphere / space, which is when this Terrier engine is going to be very efficient. We'll be able to circularize us and probably give us the push to the moon. 6,700 delta V, I'm pretty sure is more than enough to get a probe one way to the moon. So I feel that's okay. We'll throw a couple of fins on here. Well, actually a trio of fins. Just to give us a little bit more stability in the atmosphere. And just because it looks cool, not because we need it, not for a shape like this, but we're going to go ahead and throw on, tell you what, I'll put it on this side. Boop. Just to hold that up on the launch pad. I think that's going to be okay. So, first stage is going to decouple this and light the engine. I mean, if we want to be more accurate, what you would do is you would light the engine first, confirm that the burn is a go, and then let go. And if you're using real engines, which is a mod, then you do have to do that kind of thing. But in our case, we can go ahead and drop this the moment we light the engine, because the engine goes to 100% thrust basically instantaneously. So next stage is going to involve decoupling and lighting, and most likely, we'll be detaching the fairing at the same time, if not earlier. We might do it manually or not. Once you get above 25K, or certainly once you get above 30K, the air is so thin that you don't need the fairing anymore. The fairing is here to give you a more aerodynamic shape, but when there's not much air, you don't need your ship to be aerodynamic, so you want to eject the fairing to drop some weight at that point. And that'll be fine, and then next stage, and I think we're good. So we're going to call this ship, I will call this one something like the Mooner Lander. It's not even Mooner necessarily. It's really like a Lander Probe Mark 1, codenamed the, can I paste? I don't remember. The Scrotum 93. Sounds a little bit dirty, but then again, all rockets always look dirty forever. So I think that's going to be fine, right? Anyone in chat notice anything that's missing? Probably Rich, do you know what this probe? Yeah, maybe. I think that's probably true. So we could save a few Kerbal bucks by minimizing our design here. In particular, I think the thing to do would probably take this fuel tank and cut it in half. Would be still more than enough. And then that lightens up the load up here, which means you get a lot further in your ascent, but I think we're fine. Stage 5 is empty. Oh, yes, you're right. We can just eliminate that. So, bottom stage, middle stage, and the payload stage. Scrotum. Why drop weight when space is weightless? Oh, Traz. Oh, you. And you're right. I should be saying mass, I suppose. The antenna might block your thermometer. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. It's actually fine because this thermometer is built into the probe core, so I can right-click on the probe core to run the thermometer. Also, I use a mod to like tell me when there's science to be done, so I don't even have to pop it up. But yeah, you're right. It does cover up the thermometer, but I can activate the thermometer by clicking anywhere on the probe core because it's one and the same. All right. Power generation. Nope, we've got solar panels and we have batteries. We're good. It's only a 10,000 buck rocket. No need to value engineer. Yeah, we've got tons of money. It's going to be fine. And we're going to get a big reward for completing this. So let's go ahead and launch. Good news is we can't possibly kill a Kerbal with this particular payload. Woo! Life support? That would be something important to keep track of if, of course, there was anyone in here. And there isn't. What's this? Oh, that was a reward for the manned Kerbal landing that we forced to complete. Okay, we're going to turn on SAS. We're going to go to full throttle. And 3, 2, 1, launch! There we go. Thrust to weight, or surface level thrust, is 1.2 and change, which means this sort of like slow launch. A lot of our fuel early on is basically just being spent to cancel gravity, but we're still going to be perfectly fine and okay to take off. I feel very confident about this. As per usual, when we get to about 100 meters per second, which is about the time like you sort of become aerodynamically relatively stable, we will start to turn to the east. We're going to look to turn to about 10 degrees there, make sure everything is stable, and then continue to tip down. The reason we turn east is because that's the way the Earth, or Kerbal, in this case is... Oh, I'm late, I'm talking. That's the way Kerbal is rotating, so by launching in the same direction that Kerbal is rotating, we get a free kickstart. I think we get about 175 meters per second for free, just because we're launching the same direction as Kerbal. So I'm going to keep going here. This ship should have a lot of control authority, so I feel pretty secure that I could go outside the prograde circle and not flip out, although you do get a little bit more aerodynamic drag if you do that. Okay, now I've gone too far. Focus. Now, the flatter you launch, the more efficient your circularization, but it often means that you spend a little bit too much time inside of the thicker atmosphere. So there we go. Now we're back on my normal schedule. As a rule of thumb, I try to hit about the 45-degree circle when we hit about 15 kilometers, just because it's kind of a sweet spot. If we open up MechJeb, we can get a little bit more dynamic info about our launch here. Our time to apoapsis is climbing quite quickly, past a minute, which means we can really afford to go a little bit flatter. We're starting to get some aerodynamic forces, well, some heat over here, but already the atmosphere is thinning out pretty good. And yeah, I'm very confident that after we do the next stage, we'll also be discarding the fairing, because we'll be plenty high over here. Apoapsis is soon going to hit above 70, so well, we're going to go ahead and launch, and we'll discard the fairing. And I'm going to stop with my apoapsis at about 100, which is, you know, just a nice round number, so I like doing that. I'm going to push down a little bit flatter here, because again, it's thin enough that the atmosphere doesn't really matter so much that we're violating prograde so much, and the flatter we go, the better our circularization. So, hit about 100 kilometers apoapsis. Of course, you could also see this from the map screen. Just this little pop-up makes it a heck of a lot more convenient. You can do basically your entire flight from this map screen, because with the nav ball opened, you can control your ship. You can't stage from here, I don't think, but otherwise we have full control. So apoapsis is at 100, shrinking a little bit because we're still inside the atmosphere, and therefore there's still a little bit of drag slowing us down. But we're going to go there. Our ascent stage over here is going to re-enter over here and probably crash and burn. We could have put some parachutes on here and recovered this to get some of our money back, but it's not that valuable, so I don't really care. We're going to move this thing. Unlock. Move. Lock again. Excellent. The music changed, so we just entered space. Yep, we're above 70, so we are now officially in space, which means it is now safe for us to deploy our solar panels. If you deploy these solar panels in the atmosphere, they're going to get ripped off completely. There you go. It's important, especially, to have solar panels on this, because this engine doesn't have an alternator. It doesn't generate power for us. But other than that, we're good. Plenty of batteries. We can go ahead and extend the antenna. The probe has all probes have a built-in antenna for some control. They can't be used to transmit info, but they've got some control. They don't have the hugest range, though. We can, of course, just manually do the circularization maneuver just by eyeballing it and applying a little bit of logic, but it's going to be a little slicker if we set up the maneuver. If nothing else, I like the maneuver as a bit of a guide, so I've got a bit of an idea as to the ideal time to start the burn. because you want to ideally burn half before you reach the apoapsis and half after. So it's going to be about a 20-second burn. So when we're about 40 second burn. So when we're about 20 seconds from the node, I'm going to start burning prograde to circularize. So I'm not following the maneuver literally, because I'm not even pointing at the maneuver node. I'm just using this maneuver node as a hint about what we should do. Beep, beep, beep. All right, 20 seconds. So let's go for the burn. We've got to use about 800 meters per second worth of change in velocity to bring us from this arc to a nice orbit around the planet. So again, that's where that delta V kind of comes in, right? So we're going to burn that much worth of fuel to do the circularization over here. And we're burning it out of this stage, which is entirely what we're looking for. This stage is responsible for circularization and to send us to the moon. So I could be paying attention to the, to this maneuver here, or I can just look at what our path is. And again, at some point when our apoapsis and periapsis markers start to invert, that's a good sign that we've circularized. Our goal ultimately is just to make sure our periapsis is above 70, because once it is, it means at no point in our orbit are we going to touch the air. Touching the air is bad because it slows you down, causing you to fall back to the planet. With both sides above 70, it means we're not touching the atmosphere, which means we're going to be in orbit. We're in a nice stable orbit. We're going to be here forever, or until, something changes. In real life, it's worth noting there's not any point ever where the air just stops. It just gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner forever. So there's no hard edge to space. As such, even the International Space Station is constantly being slowed down by the very, very, very thin air up there and needs a boost every now and again. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and plan our trip to the moon, which is over here. If you've got your tracking station set up, you can set it as a target, which makes things, nice and pretty and interesting and everything like that. Again, you can sort of just eyeball this, seat of your pants, by simply burning prograde. The moment that your ship here, your in this case our probe, but the second that your ship comes around and the moon effectively rises around Kerbal, so right around like that, the second you can see the moon rise above Kerbal, just burn prograde, it'll get you to the moon. But you can also plan a maneuver, which would mean about something like somewhere around here. We're going to burn prograde to increase the size of our orbit. And at some point, boom, it's going to encounter the moon. I really like to do the thing where we do like the least possible burn, confirm that we'll get an approach, and then I fine tune after that. Although in practice, we do have to land, which means we want to get into orbit, so we can probably think about, something kind of like that. We want to enter into a counterclockwise orbit of the moon. The reason we want to do that is because, just like on Kerbal, the moon is rotating, and we would like to land going in the same direction that the moon is spinning, therefore we don't have to slow us down as much to match. So if we focus our view on the moon and zoom in, we can confirm that we are going to enter the moon's path over here and leave over here. So we are indeed going to be entering a counterclockwise orbit. And in fact, if I click on this maneuver again, and maybe I use the mouse wheel, we can see, and we've got this information because of our tracking station upgrades, we can see that we will in fact, am I mouse wheeling on the right thing here? Yeah, there we go. Get a little bit closer. I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's very unlikely that I'll execute the maneuver perfectly, and I'll have to do some fine-tuning anyway. But we're going to reach the node in about 2 minutes. The total burn is going to be about 16 seconds, or 32 seconds, so about 16 seconds before the node, I will start to burn. And again, it'll basically just be a prograde burn. And likewise, I'm not going to necessarily follow the maneuver. I'm just going to let it happen and see what our real path is. And I'm going to stop it somewhere like this, and then we'll fine-tune after. It's much more efficient if you do it all in one go and at exactly the sweet spot, but clumsy human hands make it very hard to do it perfectly every time. Let's just confirm our power's 100% good. Excellent. We've got about 50% fuel left in the stage. That sounds pretty swell. All right, let's do a quick save, and then we're going to just time warp. Always quick save before you time warp because it's way too easy to overshoot. So I'm just going to wait. The node in T time is going to be about 16. And honestly, again, we'll mostly just see the moon rise. And that'll also, that'll basically be when we start this burn. I might not have had my maneuver node in the perfect spot, but that's okay. Let's go for burn. Bum, 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 bum. fact 100% of serial killers were addicted to air. So, if we pop back out over here, take a look at... We can see our orbit. Our orbit is the blue line. And at some point... So, it's going to go over here. And it just so happens that by the time we follow our orbit and reach here, the moon will have also reached there. So, we'll get an intersection. And luckily, this is smart enough to... There we go. Very slow burn. Just try to bring the periapsis as close as possible. Okay, I'm going to call that good, because I'm going to want to change our normal inclination, and it's going to change some of these numbers in a second. But we're going to cancel maneuver. So right now, if I did nothing, we'd fly by the moon. We'd be about 160 kilometers above the surface of the moon. It's a little too high. It's a little too high as well, like vertically, but that's okay. We'll do a tune. Now, it would be very efficient to tune any... If we have to do any... prograde or retrograde maneuvers, we should absolutely do them here, because it would be the most fuel efficient place to do it. But we also have to do a normal burn, and the best place to do that is sort of kind of halfway through our path, and whatever, it's wonky. We'll go some amount here, and then we'll be burning downwards to push our entry into the moon's path downwards to come out more level and be closer to the equator to the moon, which will just make our landing a little easier. It's not going to take very much, and then we'll also tune the height of our entry at that point, which is going to be very easy to do it. Yeah. So it's fine. We still got tons of fuel. We've got 600 meters per second left in this stage. Way overkill. All right. So let's go ahead and quick save. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the line over here and ask the game to time warp me to around there. Whoa. Oh! Okay. So I have a mod that does, like, auto-run experiments when there's, like, science to be had. And what it did is it extended our magnetometer boom over here, which changed the shape of our ship a little bit because of the way that Kerbal calculates center of mass and has affected our path slightly. I think we're going to be fine. We're going to go ahead and transmit the magnometer, however you want to say it, scan, back to Kerbin. Good, that has been transmitted. So how are we looking? Okay, it actually sent us... We're gonna end up in a slightly higher orbit than the moon. There should be no reason that stretching our shape of our ship out would actually change our path in reality. But this isn't reality. This is Kerbal Space Program. We're still fine though, so let's go ahead and try to time warp over here again. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to turn either to the normal or anti-normal node. I never remember the names of which is which. One of these pink ones. This is pointing up or down. And we're going to burn. I'm just going to hit one tap of shift here. Excellent. It's the right direction. So you see our periapsis? This is where we're going to loop around the moon. I want to try to bring it so that it's nice and level to the equator. It'll bring us into a flatter path. This is one tap of shift. Barely anything. Barely anything. And the advantage of this is if you come in the equator and you're going counterclockwise while looking down from the North Pole, it means you're going to be coming in the same way the moon is spinning, which is going to make your descent that much gentler. Lovely. So we're still too high up here. And again, the further away you make a change, the better, because a tiny change from far away means a massive change once you get there. So we would like to, at this point, go ahead and do the tweak to bring our periapsis closer to the moon. Ideally, maybe something like 20 kilometers off the surface of the moon. We want to be sort of as close as possible without hitting any mountains, but in practice we need a little bit of a gap so we can do our maneuverings and whatnot. And 20k seems to work out pretty well. The lower you are, the less fuel you actually need, but there starts to be kind of a tight margin for error. So at this point, certainly burning prograde or retrograde will work, as well as burning radial or anti-radial. Both will do the effect. One is probably slightly more fuel efficient than the other. I'm not going to stress. I'm going to try a little prograde. If I go ahead and hit shift, there we go. That's going to bring us closer up over here. It's probably somewhere between prograde and radial or anti-radial that is like literally the most fuel efficient maneuver. But you'll see we're burning very little fuel to make this change. Very little fuel. A little bit of lag there. Alright, I'm going to call that good enough. Our periapsis will now be 22 kilometers above the surface of the moon. Groovy. Now, the one tricky bit will be, it may be possible that we will be on the far side of the moon when we need to do a maneuver, which for a probe is bad because we won't actually have a connection to the KSC, and therefore we won't actually be able to give it commands. That being said, I think you can still throttle up and down if you don't have a connection to the KSC. I think the game still lets you do that. So as long as we're pointing in the right direction first, we're going to be okay. We'll see how it gets. Alright, we're going to quick save. What we're going to do here is we're going to time warp. We're going to go to about 1,000. When we do the maneuver change, it should change the time warp automatically to a times 50. If anything else, we're going to be ready to stop the time warp regardless. So, just like that. Yeah, see? Auto drops. There we go. And actually, my science mod automatically dropped at time 1 because, hey, we can do a scan high above the moon. We've already done a flyby before, so that's why it's not asking for the press mat or the temperature, but we hadn't done it with the magnetometer over here, so we're going to transmit that data. We're in the sun, so we've got tons of power. We do use a little bit of power while we're transmitting, but then after that it recharges right away. Oh yes, the stage was destroyed. So, here's us. There's the moon. We have to try to land on that bad boy. Okay, well let's plan our maneuver. Clearly what's going to happen is at the periapsis, we are going to be burning retrograde because we're trying to lower our apoapsis, which is infinitely far away right now. We're trying to lower it so that we get a nice round orbit. Now, it's not technically critical for us to get into orbit first for our landing, but in practice, anything we're going to do is going to involve us bleeding off a lot of speed, which is exactly the same as what orbit does for us. As such, if we get into orbit, it does the same thing of A, we need to burn off a lot of speed, and B, then gives us the opportunity to, like, think a little bit harder about where we might want to land. So the only question that remains is, am I going to be able to have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center when I'm doing this burn at periapsis? At the very least, I need to have a connection long enough so that our orbit closes and we're not going to leave the moon. That's the only thing that matters. It looks right now like we will. It's also worth noting we do have this satellite in a very high polar orbit around Kerbin. So even if I can't see Kerbin, I might be able to see this satellite down here. So I think we're going to be okay. So what we'll do is we will go ahead and turn to face the maneuver node ahead of time. I think we can throttle up and down, even if we don't have a connection. So we're going to point to face the right direction for the maneuver node, which is going to be retrograde once we're there. Okay? By the time we get to here, this retrograde marker will be over here. We'll quick save. We'll time warp. You can Z and X. You can't use shift and control, but you can use... So you can go full throttle or no throttle. Okay, that's going to be perfect. So as long as you're facing the right way, no disasters should happen. I should actually time warp to the next maneuver. Or, at the very least, what I should do is maybe time warp to here. Rather than do it manually, which is just asking for trouble. I think there'll be another science experiment, I was going to say, in near space. So we transmit that. Excellent. We don't have a connection to the sun right now, but we still have lots of electrical charge, so that's going to be fine. We are 1 minute away from the node. Excellent. And we do still have a connection to the KSC. Lovely. I'll just time warp a little bit. We're only burning for 9 seconds, so we want to ideally start about probably 4 seconds before we hit the node. Okay. 6, 5, and 4. And, oops. Because we're never quite 100% centered on the node, it's very easy for that to drift. It doesn't actually matter. At this point, we're in an orbit. It's fine. Our high point is 48. Oh, we could slow down a bit more. Let's just burn just generically retrograde, which is actually what we should be doing here. To just drop the apoapsis some more. And there we go. 22 and 23 kilometers. That's pretty darn circular. At this point, we're just showing off for no reason.